Okay, let's get right into it. Today, we're looking at a pretty mind-bending theory. It takes something we all know, the 7-day week, and blows it up to a massive scale, suggesting it's actually a map for all of human history. Yeah, you heard that right. It's an interpretation of Scripture that lays out this huge cosmic calendar for all of us.
So, that really brings us to the big question, doesn't it? Could the simple week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so on, actually be a miniature version, a blueprint for thousands of years of human history? I mean, it's a huge claim, so let's dig in and see exactly how the source material even gets there.
All right, first up, a command to rest. The whole theory really starts with something that's probably familiar to a lot of you, the idea of a day of rest. This concept of a special, holy day, a Sabbath, is literally the foundation that this whole 7,000-year timeline is built on. So let's look at the source text. This quote right here, from Exodus, it sets up a pattern from the very beginning. You work for 6 days, and then the 7th day is a holy day of rest. It's this simple 6+1 rhythm that the theory takes and just scales it way, way up, from a week to thousands of years.
Okay, on to our next section, the 7,000-year week. So how in the world do you get from a regular week to a 7,000-year timeline for, well, everything? This is where the theory makes its biggest move, proposing that when the text says a day, it might mean something much, much bigger.
And here it is, the core idea, the Millennial Sabbath theory. It basically says this: just like you have 6 days of work in a week, humanity gets 6,000 years of work and struggle in history. And what comes after? A final, 7th millennium, a 1,000-year Sabbath of peace.
So, you see the switch they made? It's a direct swap. One creation day equals 1,000 human years. That's the key, the one-to-one comparison that unlocks this whole way of looking at time. The work week in the Scripture becomes a giant metaphor for, well, all of our time here on Earth.
Now, where do they get the idea that this final day is 1,000 years long? Well, they point right here, to this verse in Revelation. It literally says 1,000 years. For proponents of this theory, that's the smoking gun. It suggests this final Sabbath isn't just a metaphor, it's a literal millennium of peace.
All right, let's move on to the math behind this cosmic clock. Okay, a 6,000-year work week for humanity sounds specific, but where does a number like that even come from? Let's break down the calculation the source uses to figure this all out.
So yeah, this 6,000-year number isn't just random. It's not pulled out of thin air. The theory actually gets there by weaving together two different ideas found in the text. Let's walk through how they do it.
Okay, check this out. Step 1. They start with a passage in Genesis that mentions 120 years. Now the theory says this isn't a human lifespan, but 120 times cycles. Okay, hold that thought. Step 2. They bring in another concept, the Jubilee cycle, which happens every 50 years. So what happens when you multiply those two numbers? 120 cycles times 50 years per cycle, and boom, you get exactly 6,000 years.
And there it is. That's the calculation that gets us to 6,000 years. This whole span of time is basically framed as humanity's 6 days of work. All the wars, the building, the struggle, everything leading right up to the beginning of that final 1,000-year Sabbath.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. This theory isn't just about ancient history or some far-off future. No, it tries to pinpoint exactly where we are right now on this cosmic timeline. So, according to this cosmic week, what time is it for humanity? Take a look at this timeline. It maps out the whole 7,000-year stretch. You've got creation at the beginning, the life of Christ around year 4,000, but zoom in on that third one. The theory points to the Hebrew year 5781 and gives it a very specific label, Millennial Friday Afternoon.
I mean, how specific is that? The theory literally calculates that the years 2020-2021 are the equivalent of 12:44 p.m. on the Friday of humanity's 6,000-year week. So, okay, why does that exact time matter so much? What's the big deal about Friday afternoon?
Well, the importance comes from this concept in Jewish tradition called Minha Gedola. It's not just a random time. It's the specific point on Friday afternoon when you start to prepare for the Sabbath. It's this in-between time, a transition, when you can start to feel the holiness of the day of rest that's coming.
So think about what that means. The implication is huge. According to this theory, the time we've just been living in isn't just us, waiting around for the end. It's supposed to be an active, really important transition period. A time when a new kingdom is set up before that 1,000-year Sabbath even officially kicks off.
Okay, let's get to our last section, Lord of the Sabbath. Because after all the dates and calculations, the source kind of brings this whole cosmic theory back down to Earth, to a more personal, philosophical level. It asks, what's the whole point of this giant timeline anyway?
In this quote right here from Mark, it completely changes the conversation. It takes the focus off all the complicated math and puts it squarely on the reason for the Sabbath in the first place. The point isn't just to follow a rule, it's that this day of rest was created for us, for our benefit.
And that's really the big takeaway, right? The theory presents this whole 7,000-year structure not as some kind of deterministic trap, but as something hopeful, something designed for humanity. It's a way of saying that all of history, all the struggle, is a journey toward a real destination, a promise that after 6,000 years of hard work, there's 1,000 years of peace waiting for us.
So that leaves us with one final thing to think about. If you go along with this idea, even for a moment, that history is just one long 7,000-year week, it makes you wonder, what is the real purpose of that final day of rest? What's it all for? Definitely something to chew on.